Welcome, everyone. Tonight is a public hearing on a citizen's petition to rezone the property where the Brewery Young Mansion sits from residential to professional. Walter, before we get started, could you tell us about the notice that was posted?
Yeah, the notice was posted 2 consecutive weeks in the Longmeadow Reminder, and also on the town website with the usual 14 days advance notice for the public hearing for the first publication, the second publication being in the subsequent week. And posted in the hearing is the actual petition that the applicant has filed for the actual special town meeting.
Thank you, Walter. Walter Gunn, member of the Planning Board, Heather Laporte, Ken Taylor, myself, Don Holland, Steve Crane is with us, Town Manager, and Sharon Smith. Due to the large crowd, I'd like to have a presentation made by the LLC that's purchased the property, and that consists of Dr. Lamb, Henry, and Chris. And why don't you make a presentation for 20, 30 minutes, and then afterwards, given the number of people that we have, I know everyone wants to speak, and those who do want to speak, limit yourself to 3 to 5 minutes. I'm not going to, that'll be it. No coming back to give a response to something else that somebody said, because otherwise we'll be here till 11:30. Why don't you make a presentation? And Dr. Lamb, could you please print your name?
Yeah, sure.
And anyone who is going to be speaking, print your name legibly. And your address.
This is turning on for us here. Can anybody render technical assistance? This is working for it. Do I just push power? Maybe I'm turning it off.
It's on.
Okay, great.
Somebody get the lights, please.
Yeah,
You can dim it, but I need a little bit of lighting.
there's one switch that controls the can lights. If you turn the can lights on and dim the others, people won't fall asleep, and you can see the projection.
Everyone's falling asleep.
The end switch, Chris, has the can lights turned on.
Please,
Yeah, there you go.
please introduce yourself formally. Andrew.
My name is Andrew Lamb. I live at 734 Rear Longmeadow Street.
And I'm Jim Martin. I live at 38 Axford Road, and I'm an attorney at Robinson Donovan representing the members of the Longmeadow Historic Preservation Partners and the owners of the property.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm actually going to start first, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
On behalf of the petitioners for this zone change, I'd like to introduce into the record a few things to save time rather than go through them all. They consist of letters of support signed by 114 Longmeadow residents, a letter from the real estate agent who represented the efforts for many years to try and sell the mansion, a very interesting and powerful letter from the Young family in support of the petition, letters from the abutters to the property, including obviously Dr. Lamb, who's the closest abutter given that he lives on the former site, residents of the Historic District, letters from the member of the Historical Commission, and members of the Historic District Commission. So I have copies for each member, or I could put one into the record, however you prefer.
How about one in the record? Thank you.
Since one of the issues that has been raised in connection with this petition has been the legal issue of whether or not this property, if it was rezoned, would constitute spot zoning. I have prepared a memorandum on behalf of my clients, which I'd like to submit, which is appended to the legal opinion of town council, both of which conclude that it is not spot zoning if this property were to be rezoned.
Jim, what are the factors for for whether or not something constitutes spot zoning?
Well, the sort of general misunderstanding is that if you have a consistent zone and you rezone something in the middle of that zone, that it automatically is spot zoning, and that just isn't correct. I've cited plenty of cases in here, as did town council. The factors that go into it are both the facts surrounding the specific parcel and then the benefit to the town and the basis for the town. So here, we cite the fact that that this zone change would be consistent with the plan that was approved by the town, the master plan for an overlay zone back in 2004 at a town meeting and approved in 2011. It is consistent with prior uses. It is consistent with the fact that, given the overall residential nature of Long Meadow, in order to have any type of business or commerce, it has to be fit into the town. So if you look at the plastic surgeon's office, if you look at the community house, if you look at the restaurants, if you look at the banks, those have all been fit into residential zones. So you look at the size of the parcel, the benefit to the town, all the factors are laid out in here, Don.
Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I just want to make one correction also for the record, that we're not referencing a master plan here. And I did see early in 2003 that VHB, who was the consulting firm working with the town on the long-range plan, we do not have a master plan in Long Meadow.
You're correct, Walter.
So it is a long-range plan.
Long-range plan. So those two letters. Thank you. And we're going to try, we have several people who are interested in speaking. We're going to try and manage that and have Dr. Lamb start his presentation.
Thanks. Thanks again for giving us an opportunity to return and present our reasons why you hope you'll recommend this article tonight. As we've navigated this process, we've really appreciated that there are strong feelings on both sides of the issue. And as you know, I spent many years on the historical commissions strongly advocating against the Young Mansion being anything but a residence. But as someone who has studied this problem for 8 years, tried very hard to find alternative solutions, is the primary abutter who will be most affected by any changes at the mansion, and who now truly understands the enormous costs required to restore and maintain this building, I reversed my position. And that was really for 2 reasons. The first is I realized that no one is going to buy and restore this building as a residence. It's just too big and too costly. Second, its state of disrepair has reached the point that we don't have the luxury of waiting more years for something miraculous to happen. Tonight, I'm going to be very succinct and to the point. I will share 8 reasons why we believe this article deserves your recommendation and answer 4 frequently asked questions that should help address some common concerns. The first reason we hope you'll recommend the article is simply because the Young Mansion is an iconic historic landmark that has unique historic and architectural significance. It was built in 1885. I've mentioned in the past that it was home to noteworthy Long Meadow citizens. It's one of the best examples of colonial revival architecture in the Pioneer Valley. A second reason is that the mansion is too large and too costly to restore and maintain to ever be a residence again. As you know, it was put on up for sale in 2010. The owners were foreclosed upon in 2014, which was the same year in this photograph you see there was spontaneous collapse of the columns of the portico. The residents were finally evicted by court order in 2015. In 2016, the town compelled the bank to restore the collapsed portico for safety concerns. And about that same time, my partner, Chris Orszlak, who'd already realized the only way to save the mansion was to make it self-sustaining, actually tried to reach out to the bank, which had previously shown very little realization that this property was any different from any other home in their mortgage portfolio. Chris actually wrote up an offer, made a simple proposal with a very basic restoration cost estimate based only on looking at the outside of the building since there was no access to the inside. He just wanted to see if he could engage the bank. And he didn't complicate the matter by asking anything about rezoning. He just wanted to see if they'd respond, and they didn't. They owned it until 2017. Since the mansion was put on the market in 2010, there has been no interest in it from anyone as a resident. In the packet that Jim gave you, there's a letter from Nick Gelfand, the mansion's real estate agent, which reflects this. When we bid for it, there was only one other bidder from an individual who also wanted to rezone it for commercial use. We learned this from the real estate agent and from the individual himself. So at no time has any party wanted the mansion as a home, and there was no bidding war with multiple bidders going back and forth. Because of prior communications with this other bidder, we, and particularly I, was concerned that their plan would be very detrimental to the green and unacceptable to abutters. So to increase the likelihood of acquiring the property, we bid over the asking price. We did not know what the other party would bid. We purchased the mansion for about $500,000. Restoring and modernizing it will cost more than $2 million. So a residential buyer would need to be capable of spending at least $2.5 million on it. And a prior owner informed us that the annual expenses to live there were about $100,000. It is not in Longmeadow's best interest to install someone in this house who does not have the means to fully restore and maintain it. In that case, it would simply limp along in its current state, its decrepit state, and it would not be a long-term solution. And what has happened over the last 20 years would just continue to transpire. We must face reality. This house will not be a residence. And I just wanted to share this quote from a realtor named Anna Sigluzzo, who was the realtor before Nick Gelfand. She wrote a letter to the members of the Historical Commission back in 2013, and she said, "The house is too big and the layout too far from today's lifestyle that it is very unlikely that a private person would be willing to buy, restore, and live in what is essentially a museum. During my time marketing the property, no one was considering it to be a potential private home." Number 3, there is no angel organization coming to save the mansion. We've spoken in the past about how I and other members of the Historical Commission spent many hours of our time reaching out to nonprofits, historical preservation societies, local benefactors. None of these, this is just a partial list of some of the ones we contacted, none of them were capable or able to rescue the mansion because the costs were just too high. Number 4, the mansion has fallen into such disrepair that we can no longer wait if it is to be saved. If you've toured the mansion, you've seen it. And pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I've just included some photographs here of the interiors and the exteriors. Number 5, rezoning as professional offices is the best, most stable way to ensure its long-term survival. And as the primary abutter, I assure you I take great interest in making sure it does not become something unattractive or detrimental to the area. This is the most restrictive possible zoning change. It can never be retail, restaurant, industrial park. It would be the least impactful to the green and to the abutters, open on weekdays 9 to 5, quiet nights and weekends. It allows this property to again serve a useful purpose in our community. It would help Longmeadow's tax base. As a member of Longmeadow's Finance Committee, I can tell you that we have had the highest tax rate in Massachusetts for the last 4 years in a row. Fully restored, the mansion would generate about $50,000 in taxes annually. If it's lost, the empty lot, only about $3,100. The traffic study we discussed last month showed there would be minimal impact. This is just a revisitation of the plans we showed last month to this board. It again illustrates that the parking is in the rear, shielded from the street. As you know, we based the parking estimate on the planning board bylaws, which is based on the square footage of the building, 1 parking spot for every 300 square feet, which brings us to 36 spots. And of course, we talked about our intention to apply to the Zoning Board of Appeals to reduce that by 25% because it's located in the historic district. If for some reason they do not allow that, there is ample space behind the mansion for 9 more spots. The primary reason why we laid the parking out this way is to particularly save this tree right here, which we think is a 100-year-old tree. It's just a gorgeous tree that it would be a shame to lose. This is an image of showing how existing and added landscaping would obscure the view of the property and parking from all the abutters. And there is an opaque hedge in front of the mansion, which you can see in this image. The lower image shows the parking is obscured. The upper right image shows a wall of 20-foot tall arborvitae, which our partner Henry Clement, who is a builder, installed in a prior project. I, again, have the longest shared property line with this property. I do not want to look into a parking lot. I'd rather see a wall of beautiful trees, and this is the way we would treat the perimeter of the property. Number 6, repurposing the mansion as offices enables preservation of its historic interior spaces. And this is much more true of our proposed use than of any other alternative commercial use. Everything you see in this picture, it is our intention to save. These are just other photographs of interior details of the mansion. Second to last, number 7, rezoning the mansion in this exact manner was put forth in Longmeadow's 2004 long-range plan, which was adopted at town meeting as part of an annual report according to town manager. This report said it recommended the town consider to allow certain properties on Longmeadow Street to transition from single-family residential to office or mixed use over time. There are people in this room who helped with this 2004 long-range plan, and I assure you they were thinking of the Young Mansion when they were considering this part of the plan. This did not mean that there was some sort of grand scheme to commercialize all of Longmeadow Street. It was instead a recognition that a house like the Young Mansion might not always be able to survive as a single-family residence. The same report on that same page said it is not the town's preference to change Longmeadow Street into a commercial corridor. However, offering property owners the flexibility to locate office uses within larger homes on adequately sized lots may be necessary in the future if the cost to own and maintain these residences continues to escalate. It recommended we consider allowing some commercial uses along the corridor in strictly controlled cases within larger structures and on lots with sufficient area to accommodate off-street parking. And number 8. This plan has been unanimously endorsed by the Longmeadow Historical Commission. Their job is to advise the town on how to best preserve the historic character of our town. Saving the mansion will enhance and preserve the historic character of Longmeadow. Its loss would be detrimental to that character and the historic district. And remember, the Historic District Commission will forever ensure the mansion's exterior does not change. In this closing section, I just wanted to address 4 frequently asked questions which I think would be beneficial. Will this lead to other properties being rezoned? No. To suggest the Young Mansion would lead to rezoning of many other homes is to ignore the obvious uniqueness of this structure in this circumstance. There is simply no other home like it in town. Its size and prominence set it apart from any other home in the historic district. Future planning boards and town meetings will recognize this was a unique action that was necessary to save an irreplaceable structure on our green. We can trust them to do what they think is best for Longmeadow, just like we are trying to do now. Obtaining a 2/3 vote at town meeting is a very high bar to hurdle, and it always will be. The only reason we believe we have a prayer of doing it is because it seems obvious that this building is too big to be a residence, but too important to lose. Another question, did our town forefathers try to restrict businesses around the green? No. This was suggested to this board at a prior meeting, but it is not correct and it reflects a misunderstanding of our history. In the 1800s, there were actually buildings located on the green itself, like the Congregational Church and a couple of shops, and there was a decision to remove those buildings off the green, but there was never any objection to businesses around the green. And in fact, there have been many businesses around Longmeadow's green throughout its history, and this is a map just showing examples from the 20th century alone. At position 1, 776 Longmeadow Street, that's the Spa on the Green. It used to be the general store. Position 2 was a medical practice, 766. 734, the number 3, the mansion itself, there was a plant and flower business being run out of it. Number 5, 891, my favorite, People's Cheap Cash Store. Number 6, I have patients in my medical practice who remember when they were young going to Dr. Gordon Pratt at his medical practice at 857 Longmeadow Street. And then 797 was a restaurant and a bed and breakfast. And even today, there is a private school being run out of 777. And for 50 years there was a trolley running down the center of the green. And the point is only that the green is not static. It continues to change with time. Another question, could this affect parking around the community house? We can't say for certain whether the employees or clients of the professional offices would use public parking, and it's very possible they would not. But we also know that public parking is by definition available to for anyone to use. And there are numerous examples of businesses in Longmeadow that use town parking in this way, and several on Longmeadow Street itself. This is a map of the businesses on Longmeadow Street. You can see that each is an isolated spot surrounded by residential areas. And delineated in red is town-owned property. You can see Rinaldi's and CVS, their entire parking lot is town-owned. The businesses do not own it, yet they benefit from it, and so do we as customers. The Berkshire Bank, the front of their parking lot is town-owned. The entire Hamden Bank parking lot is town-owned. And you can see the other examples. And I would only add that around the community house, there are 68 parking spaces. There's 40 in front of the community house and 28 between the community house and First Church. And we discussed in the past, on average, during the middle of the day, about 15 of those are used. So there's plenty of parking. There's 53 spots for the public to use. And I just want to make one more comment about public safety, because children walking to school was brought up at a prior meeting. You know, my wife and I have walked our kids to center school practically every day for the last 9 years. The first thing I'd say is that there's already driveways every 10 to 30 feet on Longmeadow Street. And the second is that in all those years, I can't honestly recall any other kids walking to school past the mansion from a point farther to the north. This is because kids coming from the north generally cross over to the community house side of the green before they reach the green. Today, there are only 2 other children on our side of the crosswalk to center school that walk to school, and they both come from homes closer to Chandler Avenue, which is proximal to the school and south of the mansion. So they certainly don't walk past the mansion, and I'm sure if someone were to ask the crossing guard at that location, she would confirm this. Because my kids are the primary ones at risk from anything that happens at the mansion, you can bet that I will do everything possible to ensure it is designed appropriately, and that I will be strongly in favor of any safety features that could be installed, like speed bumps that were suggested at the last meeting. My last question: what if a future owner tears down the mansion? I think it's first important to remember that if we don't act, there will be no mansion to save. But if it is saved and restored, it is extremely unlikely that any future owner would ever demolish it. And that's because the value of the property will be primarily derived from the value of the mansion itself because of its historic and architectural qualities. No building erected in its place could possibly be as valuable as the mansion itself, and it would certainly be against the self-interest of an owner to take it down. And remember, if the mansion were struck by lightning and burned down, the design of anything built in its place would have to meet the approval of the Historic District Commission, which will forever ensure that any structure built at that location will appear historically appropriate. So there is no way that there should be any concern about someone building McDonald's there or an ugly pink building there. That just will never happen. And a corollary in my final slide is that it has been, I just wanted to address this because it's been suggested by some that we intend to rezone this property and destroy it the next day. That is an insidious rumor that is abhorrent to us and completely false. No one, not only would that be anathema to what we are trying to accomplish and counter to everything I have worked towards for the last 8 years, but it would constitute a unique and devastating form of social suicide that we would not wish on our worst enemies. We have hundreds of dedicated volunteers and supporters in this town who believe in us and agree that what we're trying to do is best for Longmeadow. To betray their trust by doing something like that would be nothing short of social suicide, and we would just never do it. Moreover, I'm going to butter to this property. There is absolutely no reason anyone in my position would agree to the establishment of a business adjacent to his home unless it was for a very good and worthwhile cause. In this case, to save an irreplaceable historic structure. We are committed to saving the Young Mansion. We are not out-of-towners who lack roots in this community. We have 8 kids in the public schools, and we will continue our involvement in boards and town commissions, and we will live here for decades. And to further demonstrate our sincere intentions, we would like to make a public pledge right now that if, while we own it, the mansion is ever demolished, perhaps because the restoration becomes impossibly expensive or a natural disaster strikes, we will petition the town to return it to residential zoning. This should assuage the fears of anyone who believes this might be possible, and we're prepared to put this in writing. But it will not be necessary because we are committed to saving this building. and are confident we can do it very well if given the opportunity to do so. Thanks for letting me speak. We hope you'll vote to recommend the article.
I have a question for Jim.
Yes, sir.
Any possibility of having restrictions on the deed for the property to reflect that it would be, if rezoned, it would only, if the town rezones to professional, votes to rezone it to professional, would the owners be willing to make a restrictive deed to say that it only be professional, and also that if something happened to the building, that the owners of the property would then seek to have the zoning change back to residential?
So we've looked into this question and have gone back and forth about it. And, it's unclear as whether or not, because a property is zoned one way, if you put in a deed, a restriction on a use and a zoning. So the compromise that we came up with, the best we thought we could do, was what Andrew just told you, which is as owners would make that pledge, put it in writing to
Select board agreement?
Pardon me?
Like an agreement with the select board?
Yes, with the town on behalf of the select board, and put it in writing, and, it would be an enforceable agreement between the town and the owners.
Okay, thank you.
We,
Any other
like to invite,
questions from board members this day?
So when you look at that issue, you believe even if it's in the deed, it might not be enforceable
well,
or?
for future owners of the property, the question is whether it runs with the land or it
Right.
runs with the structure. And it's going to be zoned, if we are successful in seeking endorsement and persuading the town to do it, it would be a rezone of the land. So now, when you talk about bringing the structure down, then you're talking about the structure as opposed to the land. So that's why we've, Andrew and Chris and Henry, in our last discussions, wanted to make this pledge that, while they owned it, that if it were torn down, that they would repetition it back to residential to give people that assurance.
Yeah, Mr. Chair? Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, that really what, you have some confusion with this in town. We have signs up that say, "Save the mansion," and then you have no illegal spot zoning. And to make it clear, we are discussing tonight and at town meeting is the land, not the building. But everybody who is in favor of the zoning change wants to save the building, but
So
as
we
you know.
agree with both those principles. We want to save the mansion, and when we agree that we do not want illegal spot zoning, and we agree that this is neither illegal or spot zoning in doing this. So, but that's a correct distinction, Walter.
Right, we are talking about the change of the land, not
Correct.
what happens to the building. Okay.
So we'd like to invite some other people who would like to speak in endorsement of this to come forward.
Okay, and each person will write their name legibly on the sheet and introduce yourself formally.
Andrew, is this yours?
Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Don.
Yeah.
Can I maybe ask, are there any more presentations? So we can turn the lights back on and shut the board off.
Turn the light back on.
Are there any more presentations?
I don't think so, Steve.
Okay, by anybody? No? Okay.
Oh, like maybe Henry, somebody?
Yeah, there will be one.
Okay,
So
we'll
leave
do
it
that.
up. Leave it up.
All right.
Turn back on. Thanks.
Makeup.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Weiss. I live at 18 Pioneer Drive. I've been a member of the Historical Commission for almost a decade now. I'm also the chair of the Community Preservation Committee in town. I'm deeply committed to the history and heritage of Longmeadow. What I want to say is, I don't want to repeat everything that Andrew said, but instead to reinforce it. First, over the last several years, the fate of the Brewery Young Mansion has dominated the discussions at the Historical Commission, excuse me. We've watched it go through foreclosure, eviction, deterioration. We had people on the committee who knew people at I think it was J.P. Morgan Chase. We looked at every scenario, and almost every single one of them led to the continued deterioration or destruction of the building. I am absolutely convinced that this proposal is the last best hope for the preservation of the building. To wait for a white knight with a bottomless bank account to come along and save this building and use it for personal use is so remote as to really, I think, border on fantasy. I do understand why some people have concerns about the zone change affecting the green. And in fact, the two competing websites out there, I think, are called one is called Save the Mansion, and the other is called Save the Green. And while I appreciate the concerns of people who are opposing this change, I think to me, and certainly to Andrew, and I think to other people who support this, this property is unique. It's part and parcel of the green. It's a unique signature structure, and we all watched it deteriorate, and that made the whole character of the green deteriorate. This is the proposal that would allow the property to start to be the condition of the property to be reversed, and anything else will eventually leave either a building that's going to continue to deteriorate, or frankly will leave a hole in the middle of the green. This proposal, I think, does preserve the character of the green. What I don't understand, and what I hope and what troubles me about the whole process is some of the personal attacks, misinformation, and scare tactics that have been used to oppose the proposed change. I've known Andrew since we were both on the Historic Commission together. He was, as he put, he's right. He confirmed, and I can confirm, he was the one most adamantly opposed to any other use of the property when we were on the committee. He personally investigated all of the options. He's the one who looked out his window for the last 8 years watching this property deteriorate. And he eventually came to realize that the only option was to acquire the property and to seek to repurpose it. He and Chris have put their money and their hearts into it. I find it troubling that some of those who oppose the zone change have accused them and others of lying, incompetence, collusion, or worse. Andrew Lamb and Chris Orszalak aren't hiding anything. They're committed to the green. They're committed to Long Meadow. I hope that the committee will ignore the personal invective, look at the request on the merits, and approve the zone change for the property. Thank you.
Thank you. As mentioned earlier, everyone will be given 5 minutes to speak. No responses.
Why is the term still located?
He's not speaking. Go ahead.
My name is Paul Calento. I reside at 40 Wilkin Drive, and I support the proposal put forth by Long Meadow residents, Dr. Lamb and Mr. Orszalak, and their partner, Mr. Clement. In my opinion, the Brewer Young Mansion, it's arguably the single building most associated with today's Long Meadow. And the current state of this structure today is a stain on our town. For many years, we walk by, we drive by, and what we're really doing is we're waiting for someone else to solve this problem. Now our own fellow residents, one of which uses the driveway that sees this every day, causing problems, and these are fellow residents. They're not nameless out-of-town or out-of-state investors. They're real people. They're people we know. They're people we trust, and they've stepped up with their own money with a proposal that is restoring the property to a state of excellence, supporting by, most importantly, a professional use case that's going to provide for regular upkeep for the building and maintenance, preserving the property and enhancing the historic district. Now, this resident-driven proposal addresses all of the planning board requirements listed on the town website, and I believe the requested zoning change to professional use is also, as discussed in the long-range plan today, previously commissioned by the town. It anticipated the need to make changes to zoning for properties at this scale, at this location, and in this dilapidated state. And the proposal made addresses all the key requirements and concerns that typically look at when you look at a zoning change, specifically the community need for a thriving green and historical district, the abutters' concerns to limit impact, if any, to the area, and that's evidenced by the slide where we looked at the parking and the landscaping and the arbor that goes into this. enhance visual amenities to the property that will likely positively impact all of the abutters on Long Meadow Street and the town overall. It also addresses a current safety issue of a blighted and potentially dangerous property if nothing's done, as well as following all of the recommendations and guidelines of the Long Meadow Historical Commission. More notably, and I think more significantly, what's been proposed is probably the single largest investment in a non-municipal building in the historic district since it was established in 1973. The key question with this or any proposal with zoning is, are we better off with this? Does this proposal and the changes to zoning required to make it happen improve the property and by extension, its neighborhood and its community? And the answer is clearly yes. The proposal from the residents, Dr. Lamb, Mr. Orzelak, and their partner, Mr. Clement, does just this, and I encourage this planning board to recommend the proposed article. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Clearly. Good evening. My name is Arlene Miller, 68 East Greenwich Road, Long Meadow. And I just wanted to, I've spoken to you before at another meeting, but I wanted to be on public record as being in support of this project as proposed. Many of the things, actually, that I was going to say have already been stolen. Thank you very much. But I'll rephrase those things. As you know, I'm fascinated with this building. I find it to be magnificent. It's iconic, as Andrew said. And for me, when you look at First Church, the community house, which we're trying to keep up very well, and the Young Mansion, they kind of all go together with that architecture and that magnificence as you're entering the green. So I think it's a very important part of our history, and it would be great to be able to save it. I've been listening to both sides of this issue, and the people in this room have all been neighbors and friends for many, many years, and I'm hearing a similar theme from both the proponents and the opponents to this. Everybody loves the character of the green, and everybody thinks this is a very special structure. Both sides, I think, would agree to that. So building on that, I think because of that, the long-range plan, which was called, what was it called, Walter?
The
Long Meadow Faces the Future.
Long Meadow Faces the Future.
And that's exactly what it is. Long Meadow Faces the Future. And I want to segue from what we agree on to the Long Meadow Faces the Future, because for about 3 years, between 2000 and 2003, residents of this town came together to look to the future. And it was a very exciting process. Hundreds of residents met over the course of this 3 years. We had a consultant, as Walter said, and we were not in a crisis. We were in a wonderful place where we had time and some money to hire a consultant, where we could freely think without pressure about the future of the town. And it's interesting that this very issue was discussed in some detail. Andrew quoted some of the things that I was going to quote, but I found Cynthia Summer, the former chairman of that committee, and I were speaking last week, and she found in her box of notes from that research a letter to the editor that she had written in 2004 because some residents were questioning this very thing, what was going to happen to the green. And so she felt, and it was anonymously signed, this other article by the concerned members of Long Meadow Historic District Commission and Long Meadow Historical Commission. And so she is writing to the paper to explain what the plan really says, and it is exactly what Andrew said, so I'm not going to read it or go back to it, but they recognize that we all recognize as part of that committee that in the future it is possible that some of these houses would not be sustainable as single-family homes. They might start to deteriorate, and we needed to be creative and come up with some other options in our toolkit. So it occurred to me, this could have been written yesterday. This article just addresses everything that we're talking about. But it occurs to me, you folks might be, I like to think about what would I feel like if I was sitting in your seat. And I might feel a little pressure and a little bit like it's a hot seat. You've got a lot of people looking at you and throwing a lot of comments at you. But it occurred to me that, you're not alone in this decision. Hundreds of residents got together and talked about this exact same scenario in 2000 and 2003, and they came to an informed, conservative, and responsible conclusion and made recommendations. And I guess it's my hope that you'll use this history, this carefully thought out conclusion that these other people, hundreds of residents, came to as you deliberate and as you try to make a decision and a vote tonight and when you bring your recommendation to town meeting. Because I think it's not just the 5 of you and it's not just the people in this room. Hundreds of residents looked at this and came to this very responsible conclusion that when a large special home on the green cannot be used as a single-family home and gets into disrepair, something like an office zone or special zone should be considered. This is an opportunity, and I know you consider it as an opportunity and a big responsibility. So I hope that all of you will vote in favor of this and bring it to the town meeting with a positive vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene.
Hello, if I could, I kind of need this spot right here for my assistant. Your assistant?
I thought they were going to do the fours and against, but
I don't know what they're doing.
hopefully they do.
I'm sure.
So, Rory, if you could come up too?
Oh, yeah.
Just shut off on you.
Good evening.
The projector just timed out on you. Gotta turn it back on.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'll let you know. Thank you. My name is Henry Cropsey, and I live at 862 Longmeadow Street. Having served on both this board and the Zoning Board of Appeals for almost 15 years, I'm very concerned about the precedent rezoning the young home will have both on neighborhood and on the town. This property is the largest house on the green and on all of Longmeadow Street. It is located in the middle of a residential zone in the heart of the historic district and candy-cordoned across from the busy William Street intersection. If this house can be rezoned commercial, then any house in town can be rezoned commercial. I'd also like to address the fact that the town, through the town manager, is a de facto co-sponsor of this plan, as expressed in the town manager's email to the investors just days after their bid was accepted, where the town manager states, "Chris, I have been in contact with Andrew Lamb and glad you guys are moving on the house. We should catch up soon to talk about what you're thinking about so we can develop a strategy that will develop broad support." Of even greater concern is the conversation my wife Melinda had with the town manager on November 29th when he told her, "I'm friends with them and I agree with what they're trying to do. I am the town planner and I intend to implement the overlay district one house at a time." This intent to implement an overlay district one house at a time is also stated in the town manager's email to town council of December 6, 2017, where he says, "Mike, we need to get focused on the issues relating to the Young Mansion. Specifically, we need an opinion on whether the proposed change from residential to professional/business is a spot zone, and if an overlay district can be implemented one parcel at a time." So I have the correspondence, which Lori will hand, but while that's happening, so what is this overlay district? The overlay district is a reference to the economic development portion of the town's 2004 long-range plan, which identified up to 37 homes on Longmeadow Street, 20 of which are located on the green, which could be converted to office use because they have an acre or more of land sufficient to accommodate their own off-street parking. This is the same section of the long-range plan which states the town could also sell off the Wolf Swamp athletic fields for commercial development. In order to adopt either of these suggestions, they would have to be presented and approved at town meeting, which hasn't happened. I point this out because the investors are saying rezoning the Young Home is a one-time event Rezoning is complicated and difficult, and it will never happen again. I disagree, especially when the town itself is pushing the rezoning one house at a time. So this board can't consider this proposal in a vacuum. The board must consider this proposal within the larger context that this is the first step in commercializing Long Meadow Street one house at a time. This board must consider the effects such an implementation will have on the green, the historic district, and the town. We deserve to have an open and upfront town-wide dialogue as to what actually is going on. We must also be clear what is at stake. Longmeadow homes command a premium for two reasons: the schools and the town's feel as a bucolic residential community where kids ride their bikes to school and people walk the sidewalks to visit their friends. We depend upon a constant influx of new home buyers to continue to be attracted in order to maintain these property values. Once you convert enough homes into businesses around the green and on Longmeadow Street, we will look and feel just like anywhere else. Once that happens, we will have forever lost one of the two main attractions which drive new buyers to our town. It's clear from the investors' presentation that their plan raises a lot of unanswered questions. To begin with, now that Dr. Brooks is no longer going to be the anchor tenant, to my knowledge, the investors have no tenants. This leaves us to fall back onto the zoning bylaws, which tell us that in addition to the usual medical and professional uses, a professional office district also includes such other businesses as financial services, which would include a bank or ATM potentially open 24 hours a day, or even a medical marijuana dispensary or treatment center. Because the investors have refused the planning board's request to submit their full plans to this board, pursuant to the site and design review process, there are also a number of technical questions which remain unanswered. Normally, this board would retain an independent third-party engineering firm to conduct a traffic study. Without site and design review, all we have is the applicant's own study, which this board never accepts from any applicant given its inherent bias. So while we do know the obvious, that this proposal will result in increased traffic, we don't know by how much. Normally, this board would have the benefit of a stormwater drainage report. This parcel has now been cut almost in half from 1.8 acres to 1 acre in order for the investor to the rear of the young home to add another 0.8 of an acre to his property in order to further shield himself from his own development. The property will have a new curb cut, entrance and exit, and a roadway to this new parking lot, all resulting in a substantial portion of this property now becoming one large impervious surface. Where will all the water go? This property is located at the top of a hill sloping off to the rear towards Ely Way. Is the proposal to simply let water do what water naturally does and flow downhill? What effect will this have? We don't know. Normally, this board sees an engineered lighting plan showing whether and how much of the parking lot lights and other lighting at this facility will spill over onto surrounding properties. Northampton, for example, is a member of the Dark Skies movement, which is sensitive to the issue of light pollution and the preservation of our night skies. How sensitive is the investor's proposal to these issues? We don't know. Businesses require signs. How large will these signs be, and where will they be? Normally, the planning board would have all these specifications, but they haven't been presented, so we don't know. These are only a few of the issues fleshed out during the site and design review process, so that this board and the residents of the town actually know what we're getting. None of this has happened. However, we do know a few things. We know that under our zoning bylaws, the professional office zone allows for many businesses, some of which could require as few as 36 on-site parking spaces for lawyers and accountants and other professions with a low foot traffic, to as many as 80 parking spaces for certain high-intensity, high-traffic medical uses. We know the investor's plan provides for only 26 on-site parking spaces, approximately 10 short of the minimum and perhaps as many as 54 short of the maximum. We know the investors propose to make up for this shortfall by using the town parking in front of the community house. We know the community house parking accommodates approximately 50 vehicles. Doing the math, if the tenants are high-traffic medical uses requiring a minimum of 80 parking spaces, there will be insufficient parking in front of the community house, even if the investors use all of the available parking, ignoring that on any given day, that parking is already quite full. We know that if the community house parking is used for this project, people trying to go to the Young Home will have to cross Long Meadow Street without the benefit of a sidewalk or crosswalk. We know if the property can't accommodate its own parking needs, and parking is tight over at the community house, people will be circling around the green trying to find parking. We know this section of Long Meadow Street sees heavy foot and bike traffic from school children and others. We know the residents of this town are looking to this board for guidance on these issues, given this board's acknowledged expertise in these areas. So based on what we do know, this is not a safe and well-thought-out plan. And that is my point. While I believe there's not enough information available for this board to recommend rezoning this property for commercial use, I do believe there is enough information for this board to recommend against rezoning this property, and I strongly urge you to do so. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, if you can just give me a second here to tee up. I'm Lori Hausman. I live at 796 Long Meadow Street. There we go. Do this thing. And it takes a minute to warm up.
Yeah.
Yep. Here we go.
Is this important?
I don't believe so. I think that's small. Okay. That's audio. I appreciate the assistance. I don't know, Henry.
You have to hit the source.
Source. Thank you. Does anyone know, is it the USB or?
You use computer.
Computer 1 or computer 2,
Yeah,
you know?
it depends.
Looks like computer 2. This one. There we go. Try that one.
Is there a projection setting on your computer?
It always works when I just do this. Well, without the, I do have handouts, so at least the board can follow along. I apologize to everyone in the audience for not being able to have some sort of video accompaniment.
Thank you.
How is that connected? For a USB port?
So one of those,
Yeah.
the smaller one.
Yeah.
There's an
It's
adapter.
one of those new fire ports.
Yeah, it's a
USB for.
I don't know what kind. It's one of the newer computers, and That's why I have my own
Is it
thing.
possible that you could choose the USB as the source?
I don't know. I don't want to waste more time from
Okay.
the group here. I apologize.
John, you want to see if you can get it to work while Lori goes forward?
Just go through and select this, it'll only take a second, just go through and select the other options. It might be under USB. Andrew, what did you use on your computer? What's that?
It was used, I had a different computer, so I used that adapter, which belongs in this room.
Is that our Mac or a PC?
It's a map.
Oh,
Are they using courtrooms?
I can't help you.
They don't.
Mr. Chair?
Yes?
I don't see any reason why the folks that have prepared, that put a lot of work into preparing their presentation, could not continue to work with the audio visual, maybe sitting right here in front of the screen, while others who may want to speak or.
Do you have AirPlay?
Sorry.
I'm
Why don't
afraid
you-
you're going beyond my skill set.
Yeah, why don't we just go forward with it? Go ahead.
Why don't you just make the presentation orally?
So, we have titled ourselves as Save the Green. However, that was to be succinct, that was to have to be succinct and to have something direct. What we're really talking about is saving the young home, because saving the young home means saving the green. Saving the green means saving Long Meadow. Rezoning the land to commercial use is not the way to save the young home. Rezoning is desirable to the owners because it maximizes profits. Regardless of the structure on top, commercial land is more valuable than residential land. Adding a section of commercial use changes the character of the green. There'll be more traffic, it'll be less walkable, it just won't be what we have all grown to love and know. It opens the door to further expansion of commercial zoning. The most prominent feature of Long Meadow is the green. Changing its character will change Long Meadow. The list price, I don't have anything up there, but the list price, I'll just pretend. The list price over the last 7 years has dropped year after year until it was finally taken off the market in 2013. It originated in 2010. It was offered at 2.2 mil. In 2011, it was 1.4 million. In 2012, it was 1.2 million. Again, it was taken off the market for a couple of years. Once it came back on the market in 2017 at $444,200, there was interest. It was a reasonable price. It was a price that people could work with. The developers did pay over asking price. I think they wanted to ensure that they got the property. They outbid a couple of other, they outbid at least one other bidder. Owning the home is necessary to give them a foothold in this proposed commercial expansion of Long Meadow Street. It gives them the first step to capitalize on this purchase. The developers have said that if they're not able to rezone that piece of property, that piece of land, that they'll have to demolish the building. Being presented with that either-or choice does not leave the voters with many options. There has been no plan submitted, as Henry was talking about. There are general ideas for what could be done with the building and what will be done with the building, but there is no concrete plan that has been presented. The voters are being asked to vote uninformed. They're being asked to vote on their gut, based on a feeling. We do not know who the tenants are going to be. We don't know the level of traffic that will be generated. We don't know what true parking requirements there are. Without a written plan, the developers are relieved of obligation and commitment. There is no guarantee that they will renovate the home once the land is rezoned to commercial. The voters deserve an informed, open debate. It's never good to make this sort of a decision just on emotion. There are other options. One option would be for the developers to follow through with the 2016 plan, which was laid out in detail. The plan was to restore it to a marketable single-family residence. The proposal included repairing the front portico at that time at an estimated $140,000. At this point, they would benefit from the fact that that portico has already been repaired. It should increase the profit and make turning it into a single-family residence more certain. Another option, the second bidder who was outbidded, was to turn it into a bed and breakfast. Longmeadow has approved bed and breakfasts in the past. Other historic districts in neighboring towns have turned some of their buildings in the historic district into bed and breakfasts. It's more consistent with what's going on around the green. It still has a sense of a residence, not a commercial use. A third option might be luxury condos. It's a beautiful setting. It's a big building. It could be turned into luxury condos. A huge parking lot wouldn't be required. We've learned that there is somebody in town who would like to turn it into luxury condos, but it sold too quickly. The building sold within 9 days to allow them to put together an offer. We've named ourselves Save the Green, but the truth is that we want to save Longmeadow. For that reason, we ask that you reject the proposal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
That was unplugged?
Yeah, that's the
Good evening. My name is Tim Summers. I live at 679 Longmeadow Street with my wife Noelle, who's here with me this evening. We have been in town for about 17 plus years. We live right almost across the street, a little bit north of the property we're talking about. So we're right in the heart of the action. I first of all want to state that I thank you all for your service to the community, and I think both sides consist of people who are well-intentioned. I think everyone's trying to do the right thing. We just have a difference of opinion. So I wanted to preface my comments by saying that. I basically have one point to make. It's something that's already been stated. I wanted to expand upon it a little bit. But before I mention that, I want to say one other thing before I get into that about parking. I walk by the community house pretty much every day. I jog by there probably 3 or 4 times a week. I'm pretty aware of that area. And in all due respect to Dr. Lamb's comment, an average of 15 parking spaces is kind of meaningless. The community center needs those spaces. So a real example that's close to my heart, actually, is our son is a veteran. He had a Veterans Day event there, November 11th on 2016. It was a wonderful event. We had 100 people there, about 25 veterans there. About 10 of them spoke about their experiences in different wars going back actually to World War II. We couldn't have done that event if the parking isn't there. It's as simple as that. And there's a lot of events there. There's also events at the church that are very beneficial to the community. We need those parking spaces. So an average of 15 is meaningless. We need to, when an event's going to happen, we need the parking spaces. The primary point that I wanted to make tonight, however, has to do with, what we're voting on. There's a lot has been said, and I think it's important that we focus on what we're voting on. So there's a lot of signs up in town that talk about saving the mansion. So A vote yes does not provide any such protection to save the mansion. A vote yes does not mean that the home will be improved upon. A vote yes doesn't mean that the home will remain intact. Vote yes means that the zoning will change from residential to professional, and as was said earlier, the vote applies to the property. It does not apply to the home. So, apparently this is a little bit of a sensitive subject, but, the investors, once they have their zoning, have the ability to demolish the property. And, I've been involved in commercial deals for years. I've done hundreds of commercial deals. There's two constants. One is that things change, and two is that a pledge is limited, very limited. And pretty much if you don't have some financial teeth in there, it just doesn't have a lot of value. Things have changed. I remind, for all of those listening, we were told that Dr. Brooks was going to move in and take 2/3 of the space. Then we were told Dr. Brooks isn't going to take 2/3 of the space. I recently I've talked to a lot of people, and they're concerned about what to do. They don't know what to do. I talked to a woman just the other night, and she was a definite yes. And when we talked about, and she was adamant that this would save the mansion, when we talked about the fact that we were talking about the property and not the home and the zoning in the vote, she was astonished. And she said to me, pretty much I quote, she said, I don't know who to believe. So I think that's an important point, and I would ask that on the 25th, when we have the vote, that someone who is not biased, who has some level of credentialing, knows something about zoning statutes, explain to the voters prior to the vote that, as was said earlier, this vote, because there's an awful lot of information floating around, this vote simply has to do with the property. And the implications of a yes vote are this, and an implication of a no vote is this. A no vote allows the property to stay residential, and we'll see what happens with that. There could be other plans, there could be other buyers. They could sell the house. Yes means we have the ability simply to go ahead with the commercial, because I think it has to be framed and clear so people understand. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Michelle Steger, and I live at 35 Warwick Street. I'll be a little bit redundant, but I just want to be sure that we give a real clear timeline of what we've been going through over the last 8 years. I was a new member of both the Historical Commission and the Historic District Commission in the spring of 2010, when the then owners of the Young Mansion came before the HDC to say they were planning to put their home on the market, and they were wanting to get input from us to get our thoughts on the possibility of it becoming a bed and breakfast. I could sense then the desperation this owner felt to sell the property. She said she hadn't realized how much the upkeep of the home had required and how expensive it was, and they simply couldn't keep it up any longer. We informed her at that time that the decision to rezone the property wasn't in our hands. Instead, it would be in the hands of the community at town meeting, where it would need to be approved by a 2/3 vote, and I think that's very important. The community gets to decide this ultimately. At the time, I didn't think this would be necessary. I knew the home had some very special features like Tiffany stained glass and Zubehr wallpaper, which, by the way, hangs in the White House in Washington. And I felt confident that someone with a passion for preservation would buy the home. But as time went on, the home began to deteriorate more rapidly, and I became more concerned about the property. During this time, Andrew Lamb joined both the Historical Commission and the Historic District Commission. And as you can imagine, this home was discussed by both commissions quite often. And both Andrew and I were vocal opponents of any sort of solution that involved changing the property's residential status. We both believed that a residential buyer existed, and it was just a matter of time before a buyer emerged and a sale would take place. Unfortunately, the mansion continued to decline and went into foreclosure. I actually attended that foreclosure auction in the fall of 2013, and at that time I asked the then real estate agent if there had been any interest at all in the home as a residence, and she said that there had not been any interest at all from residential buyers. After the foreclosure occurred, the home began deteriorating even more rapidly. And in June of 2014, as I know everyone in this room who was living in Longmeadow at that time remembers, one of the columns literally fell over into one of the other columns. And this, of course, only increased our level of alarm and concern. At this point in time, Andrew took it upon himself to begin researching in earnest potential solutions. And he and I still believe there was a residential buyer out there. But all of us serving on the Historical Commission with him at that time really appreciated his diligence in trying to solve a problem that was only intensifying with each passing year. And in fact, he worked so hard to find a solution that he reached out to a historical preservation organization near Boston and arranged to have them come out to look at the mansion. But on the day they were going to come and tour, they called and canceled because they'd had a board meeting earlier that day and decided that the costs to save the mansion were so substantial that it might consume their entire endowment and bankrupt their organization. I can say with absolute certainty that nobody has worked harder than Andrew to find a solution for the mansion and to make sure that it's preserved in an appropriate way. I know that it is only recently, after it became clear that there's been no interest in restoring this property to be used as a residence, that Andrew realized that rezoning the mansion was the only way to save it and put it on a sustainable course moving forward. Andrew and his family moved into Longmeadow at the same time that my family moved here. I know how much he loves Longmeadow and how much he cares about the history of this extraordinary community and the mansion. Similarly, it's taken me almost 8 years to get to this place. But I now believe, too, that there is not a residential solution for this property. The costs to renovate it and keep it maintained are simply too great. There hasn't been any residential interest in this property at any point in this process. But make no mistake, the Young Mansion is truly amazing. Its sheer size and prominence on our green make it a special property. But the interior contains items that make it truly unique and exceptional. And it has an amazing history that is woven into the history of our green and of Longmeadow. It would be such a shame to lose it. I feel quite confident that we would look back 5, 10, 20, even 50 years from now and lament that we had a chance to save this historic property and we squandered it. I have every confidence that should this rezoning be approved, the mansion will be restored with great care, and it will once again be the jewel of our green. And that's why I'm asking you to endorse this article. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Bill Togneri, 870 Longmeadow Street. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for allowing us to come before you again. I'm going to cut right to the bottom line here. The bottom line of this proposal is economics. The developers propose conversion of the property to business space. This proposal looks good in a PowerPoint presentation, and they have struck a chord with many in the community with their bullet points. Some true, some not so true. They have bent the truth with statements about no interest in the property as a single-family home, 2/3 of the building will be taken by a local doctor, and this is the only proposal that makes economic sense. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record a copy of Mr. Orzelak and Mr. Clements, two of the developers, offer to the bank in March of 2016, where they state they will return it to a marketable single-family residence. Do I give this to?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Walter.
So the statement that was just made by the person who sat here before me said there was no interest. There was interest, and it was right to the bank. I urge all Longmeadow residents to view all these documents that were obtained under the Federal Freedom of Information Act from Town Manager Steve Crane. It will give you an idea of the level of, I don't want to say that word. It will tell you what took place between the developers and Mr. Crane. I would now like to focus on the economics of this proposal. We know what they purchased the property for, And after they sold the third of the property back to Dr. Lamb, they're into it for $430,000. Dr. Lamb's PowerPoint tonight says it's going to take $2 million to invest in the property. So let's see if those numbers really work. Their first problem is the amount of usable or rentable office space in the area. This will affect the price that they're going to be able to charge per square foot in their property. As you look at current prices in town, you'll see that rentals go somewhere between $15 and $24 per square foot. So let's make a couple of assumptions about that property. Let's give them 100% rental. And everybody in this room would agree that's going to be hard to do, but let's give them that. And then let's shoot in the middle of the ground, because I can do the math on round numbers. Let's give them $20 a square foot. And then let's say that they can figure out how to get 10,000 square feet of rental property out of that 10,900 square foot home. So that gives them a pretty fair chunk of revenue per year. We would all agree to that. But now you have to factor in expenses. And the best they can hope for is roughly around $110,000 in revenue per year. And when you apply a standard rate of return against that number, an investment of somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million is what most prudent investors would be willing to pay. Now, that $1.2 million is an interesting number, because in the 2016 offer to the bank, Mr. Orzelak and Clements made a $300,000 all-cash, no contingency offer on the property. And in the plan where they state they will keep it a single-family residence, they estimate renovations amount at just slightly over $800,000. So that $1.2 million number is what the prudent investors would max out at to make a reasonable return on that investment. So I believe my analytics and Mr. Orzelak's analytics were probably the same. Now, these investors are smart, accomplished people. Make no mistake about it. They are in this to make money. But the numbers they present just do not make economic sense. So you have to ask yourself a couple questions. They have stated they will not lose money on this project. How are they going to accomplish that? Will they try to only invest part of the money they claim and then see what happens? Or do they have another plan? We would all agree that new construction is less expensive than renovation. And it is interesting that the only people who mention anything about demolition of the mansion are the investors and their supporters. Looking at the hard numbers, in my opinion, these investors have other plans for 734 Longmeadow Street. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. With regard to Steve Crane, he's an honest individual. Part of his role is to bring tax money into the town. While the board doesn't necessarily agree with some of the proposals Steve makes, that's what he tries to do. And he's told the board members in advance that he was friends with Dr. Lamb, and he's been upfront about it. So personal attacks anymore will not be accepted. Next.
My name's Peter Wakeman. I've, lived on the green for in excess of 30 years. We live at the south end of the green. Excuse me, I'm sorry about my voice tonight. We've been increasingly upset about the state of repair of that home. We like the proposal and we support it. That's all I have to say to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Marie.
Good evening. Marie Angelides, 199 Tanglewood Drive. I think I'm going to repeat what a lot of people have been saying. It's a treasure on the green. I think that it's a very bold proposal, and I think it does make economic sense, and I really appreciate the people that are town residents are coming forward to try to make this. So I request that you do positively consider the zone change for the young mansion and the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeffrey Wint. I live at 930 Longmeadow. I lived there for about 23 years. My house was built in 1795. I moved into it in 1994. It was not perfect when I moved into it. It was not great. There were a lot of things. Over the last 20 years, I've fixed it up. I've renovated it. 2008, I actually got an award from the town and the Historic District Commission and the bunch of people for thoughtful renovation. I didn't take however much I spent. I don't even know how much I spent. I didn't take how much I spent and do it all at once. I did it gradually. I lived there. That's what you do with an old house and a residence. I love old homes. Most of the people who are not in favor of rezoning this don't hate old homes. We all love old homes. That's why we live on the green. I understand you're all volunteers. I appreciate your efforts. I know that I sent a letter at one point requesting some information. I didn't quite get a full answer. It was not meant to be a personal attack. It was meant to question this one event, which I didn't think was going the right way. I did come here, though, to address a couple of things. We see this plan, and we kind of get a glimpse of a plan. It goes up and down. I take some pictures of it as it's up on the screen. I look it online. And this plan, even though it's a plan for the property, is part of the basis of the developer's appeal to the town. It's going to be a nice plan with trees and minimal parking. So I want to just address parking. You know, I'm a physician. I know that the Longmeadow, East Longmeadow complex is 54,000 square feet, has 400 parking spaces. That's 80 parking spaces if you downsize it to this property. My office, I have about 6,000 square feet in my office. If it's a 117,000 square foot complex, 3 buildings. I don't own any of it. I only rent part of it. But there's about 650 spots in that, 110,000 square feet. And it's busy. It's packed. Then, you go out the parking lot here, and what's that big white stuff that's out there? It's snow. It snows. So then all of a sudden, half your parking's gone for a third of the season. So I don't think that the parking plan that they have is tenable. And that's important because they're then asking for a variance to get parking elsewhere. They mentioned that Dr. Brooks's staff parks across the street. But if Dr. Brooks's office was a new project, you wouldn't approve it because it wouldn't have sufficient parking. I'm not an expert in this, but I go online, I read some things, and I go on to Department of Transportation websites, and I read about these things. The size of the driveway is not an official driveway size. A two-way driveway has to be 30 feet, about the size of a road. For reference, that's about the width of Longmeadow Street where it intersects Williams. I think it's 31 or 30.5 feet. That's how wide. I learned about something called, forgive me, approach site triangles. So when you have an intersection and you have a zone where 2 streets meet, Williams and Longmeadow, well, I'm not an expert in this, but if an uncomplicated intersection for 35 miles per hour, that's 165 feet you need. You put a 30-foot driveway 50 feet from that intersection, you create a very dangerous situation. Then you say to yourself, there's lots of parking studies online, and I could tell you about these, but you know more about this than I do, and about plot plans and drainage and all the things Henry mentioned. I just don't understand. If the goal is to make a nice project that preserves the integrity of the green and doesn't look bad, why is part of the property taken away that could hide the parking much more easily. So I think that they've handcuffed their own property, and I understand the motivation. Listen, if I had the house behind that property, I would do everything I could to control what was going on. But I don't think it's a tenable commercial project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Nancy Hayes, 56 William Street here in Long Meadow. According to the town zoning bylaws, zoning requests for change of status should consider the needs of the community. This is the 6th town meeting I have attended, and I've never heard a suggestion from board people that the petitioners needed to demonstrate the need for this zone change for the benefit of the community. The burden of proof that this zone change is necessary for the town belongs on the petitioners. I've never seen an argument on their behalf that this is the case. Instead, they continually speak to the necessity of the zone change for their benefit. They need to make this building into office space so they can make this risky purchase financially sustainable. They make the case that saving the building is somehow necessary for the residents. They have never made the case that adding office space is necessary for the residents of Long Meadow. After having done some research on the amount of available office space currently on the market in Long Meadow, it becomes evident that this would be a very difficult case to make for the necessity to rezone this property. An online search for available office space found over 22,000 square feet of office space available at this time. Additionally, there's a 54,000 square foot medical building being built on Dwight Road. So one might assume or might think that some offices presently occupied will move into that new structure, and then we have even more available office space in town. So the question, do town residents need another nearly 11,000 square feet of office space? According to this brief research, the answer would be no. Additionally, the zoning bylaws require that the reuse of property be placed in a geographic area complementary to that new use. Again, I've never heard the petitioner support this requirement, perhaps because it is difficult to provide evidence that an office or business building is complementary to a beautiful historic residential area in our town. More significantly, an office building, business location does not belong in the middle of our historic green. If the petitioners wanted to open new office space in the town of Long Meadow, they should have looked for property in an already established professional area designated by our own town plan. I am here tonight again to reiterate that the petitioners have never offered evidence that the town needs more office space or that placing a new business property in the center of a residential district can meet the requirements of the bylaws that are supposed to protect our town, not just the interest of a few residents who took a risk and now need to proceed contrary to our bylaws. I would urge that you do not allow this plan to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. What sections of the zoning bylaws were you referring to?
I'm sorry. I did this research some months ago, so I couldn't tell you off the top of my head the very numbers of them.
John Robbins, 1028 Long Meadow Street. I grew up in town. I lived on the green for the first 5 years of my life at 664. I love history. I love the green. I then my parents moved to 5 Laurel Street. After we moved out, it was demolished. It's very upsetting to see buildings, homes torn down. I think we have a home here. It's not a business, it's a home. People live in, right? You celebrate Christmas, you have kids running around. If we make the zone change, it will never be a residence again. It will never be a home. It has lost its soul. Right? You're talking about medical doctors and medical waste and parking, not a home, not what we want around the green. A number of people have quoted from the long-range plan, right? But it was cherry-picked. Here's the long-range plan right here. The town green is a living museum located along the most historically unspoiled section of Route 5, which runs from its beginning near the Canadian border to its end at the Connecticut shore. Within Long Meadow, the Route 5 corridor is a local historic district under the legal auspices of the Historic District Commission. I served on the Historic District Commission for 7 years, and I'm currently a member of the Historic District Commission. The next one is very relevant. This plan supports efforts of the Historic District Commission and the Long Meadow Historical Society to maintain the town green in its historical and cultural context with an emphasis to keep the area as is. Not put an overlay, not put a medical office building, but to keep it as is. Right? That's in the long-range plan. That's never been discussed. The Long Meadow Historical Commission is responsible for keeping the green intact, keeping it a living museum, not converting it to medical office buildings with signs and parking issues and traffic. That's not what we want for Long Meadow. That's not what I want for Long Meadow. So I would highly recommend voting no on the rezone. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned is taxes. Right? The last time I looked at the Vision appraisal, this house is worth and assessed at over $900,000. Right? So that's tax revenue that's coming in today. And it won't increase with a business in terms of the rate of taxation. It's going to be the same. So if they renovate it and make it a residence, it will be a tax wash for the town of Long Meadow. Thank you.
Good evening, Richard.
Good evening. Richard Foster. I do not live on Long Meadow Street. I live at 29 Captain. Put a little lightness in the room. First of all, I appreciate you stepping up and serving your community. I realize how difficult it is. I realize the time that you dedicate to it, and I think everybody should applaud your efforts. I certainly do. You've got a task before you that I'm glad is not before the Select Board, but nevertheless it is before you. I have confidence in your judgment. I have total confidence in your judgment that you're going to research these proposals, you're going to listen to the comments made at this meeting tonight, and you're going to render a judgment that is in the best interest of our community with your collective judgment of your board and your professionalism. The present issue before us is the Young Estate, and that's it. It's just the Young Estate. And on one hand, you have a plan that has been presented to you to preserve the Young Estate through a rezone action. On the other hand, you've not been given any plan to preserve the Young Estate. All you've been done or served with are excuses on why not to approve the plan. I think prudent people would look and say, I have a plan. There may be some problems with the plan. It may not be a fulfilled plan. It may not be whole. But it is a plan. It's a well thought out plan. Been a lot of dedicated money put to that plan. You've had people step forward when no one could be found in this community to step forward and buy that estate. You had people, investors as they might be, step forward and buy the estate and take a gamble that they could turn this into a profitable situation. But in the meantime, they came at it with a plan to preserve the estate. And I think it's a very unique thing that they've done. Will it be preserved? Future will, that'll be the rule on it. The future will tell us what will happen on the estate. But at least there is a plan. And I think you all realize that. Ironically, both options may end up with the same outcome. You could have a plan that fails and the estate is demolished. You can do nothing, and apparently, if we believe everything's been said in this room from both sides, since there's no owner to stand up and take it, that structure eventually is going to be demolished. So in one case, we've got a possibility of a plan that saves an iconic structure in our community. And on the other side, it's a dismal opportunity that's going to be destroyed and torn down. It'll fall into disrepair, and there's no white knight, as they said, that's going to ride in and save the structure. I close out as I started. I appreciate your public service. I understand the task before you, and I hope you'll take the comments. And I do appreciate everybody that's showing here tonight. It's a wonderful form of our government when people can come together and express their views, both for and against the proposal. I'd like to thank LCTV for putting this on the air, too. It's going out to all the communities. I hope a lot of people have turned in. I wish you the best of luck in your deliberations and your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Carnahan, and I live at 311 Farmington Road, and I also thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will be brief, and I would like to bring us back to the remarks of the beginning of the meeting. This is about a zone change to the land and not to the structure. And I think that while the mansion is an exquisite property, and I have spent personally the better part of my career conserving and interpreting the natural and cultural resources of the Commonwealth, I am not in favor of rezoning the property, of rezoning the land, excuse me, to save the property. There is no guarantee, as stated this evening, that a change in the zone will ensure that the mansion is saved. A change in the zone will only ensure that it changes to a professional zone. It then becomes a precedent for any of the other properties on Longmeadow Street or elsewhere in Longmeadow for a similar zone change legally. As outlined tonight by many of the speakers, Longmeadow Street and the Green, our sidewalks, our trees, our homes, our walkable neighborhoods, our bikeable distances to schools are part of the character of our community. There has been great pain in setting up zones and pockets within our community to support that character and that fabric. And I ask that you think very thoughtfully in your recommendations for a change to the zone and how that change will alter the character of our community now and legally into the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex Grant, 54 Westmoreland Avenue. I'll make my comments brief because I did send you a letter previous. But I'd like to address something that, in response to some of these comments, and I would encourage this board to think practically. I will admit it, I do not have the same passion for this as a historical structure as everyone else does. I'll be upfront about that. I think about the big picture here, which is I think about property values in our community. And having served on the select board for 3 years and having thought deeply about our trajectory of property values, our 25 mill rate, our ability to sustain the town budget, to me, that is what's truly the most important issue when it comes to town government. And so with that frame of reference, I think about this structure, and it's an eyesore. It's an embarrassment. And right now, if you look back at the last several years of our total assessment, we had a number of years where it went down, and then it's increased slightly the last few years, okay? That trajectory is critical to our ability to raise tax revenue in this community. I am confident that that trajectory will go up because I believe Longmeadow is a very attractive place to live. Unfortunately, this house says otherwise. I mean, it says nobody wants to live there. That we would allow it to go on for 8 years in the condition that it's in, and that we as a community can't come up with a solution. And unfortunately, I think that is the wrong message. And will it make all the difference in the world to change that trajectory? No, but I think it is part of the picture. And I think in that context, when we think about alternatives, and this is where I come back to the point about thinking practically about this decision, if we were in a situation back in the mid-2000s when property values were going up and let the good times roll, right, then maybe we'd have the confidence that somebody one day would think that, you know, having a $1.5 million house on the green, you know, right along a busy street would be just the thing to do. But 8 years say otherwise. And what I would suggest is that, you know, believe your eyes, you know. And if 8 years of deterioration of this home isn't enough to convince you that there's not another plan, I'm not sure there's a greater testament to that proposition. So I would ask that the board endorse this proposal as a practical solution to what is a significant problem.
Good evening. My name is David Bogan. I live at 655 Long Meadow Street. I've spoken to you once or twice before. And fortunately for you, I didn't plan on speaking, so I'll be uncharacteristically brief. What you've heard are some very eloquent statements on both sides of the issues. I actually commend Mr. Lamb, Mr. Orszlak, and Mr. Clemens for what they're trying to do. I don't agree with it, but I do commend them for their initiative. Just a couple of issues I'll highlight. Mr. Holland, you asked counsel at the beginning for his assessment with regard to whether or not this is spot zoning. That's the nature of the legal business. You put two lawyers in a room, they're going to come to different conclusions. I am a lawyer. I come to a different conclusion when I look at that analysis. I think it is spot zoning. One of the elements that you look at, and he alluded to it, is the benefit to the community. Saving a historic building is generally not an element that is considered a benefit to the community. In many cases, it's money that is paid to the community. That's not what's happening here. It's quite the contrary. This is not a 501c3. To their credit, this is a profit-making entity that does not, in and of itself, saving the building notwithstanding, make it a benefit to the community. Someone said earlier that it really does come down to both sides being true. Is it saving the building? Or the young mansion? Is it saving the green? Unfortunately, there's a point at which those two agendas become mutually exclusive. And part of the problem, with all due respect to the chair, I don't think I heard Mr. Togneri criticize Mr. Crane. I think he alluded to his conclusion and documents, and I trust you've all read the documents that were disclosed by virtue of the Freedom of Information Act requirement. And I think when most people read that, they are concerned. Was the process fair, or was it designed or engineered to result where we are today? I would invite folks to read those documents. Go to saveourgreen.blog. You'll see the text, you'll see the emails, and you'll see why there are some that have some concerns about the process. In the end, I've been told we have the longest green in New England. And what the problem is someone said, you take the largest building on the green and you want to turn it into something other than a residential structure. With all due respect to Mr. Grant, I agree, it's an embarrassment, but I don't think it necessarily inures to the detriment of the town of Long Meadow. I think there are people, when they think of Long Meadow, they do not think of the Young Mansion. They think of the green. And to change the green for the sake of the mansion is going to be a detriment to everyone. Thank you.
Do you have that treatise section on multiple factors with regard to spot zoning? Excellent, thank you. I hear about the information. Yeah. Excellent.
Good evening, all. I am Michael Corona, and I live at 24 Chandler Avenue, and I've been a resident of that street for 25 years. I would like to talk to you about the traffic. I go in and out of Chandler Avenue regularly every day, several times a day. I think we all can agree that William Street and Route 5 is one of the most busiest intersections in this town. There are no stoplights. It works, but it is very busy. And this project will only exacerbate that intersection. I've measured the distance between Chandler Avenue and the middle of William Street. It's about 210 feet. I measured the distance from William Street to their proposed driveway. It's about a little under 200 feet. It's just about 200 feet. To get out of Chandler Avenue on a daily basis while people are pulling out of William Street and going north like a bat out of hell is a very difficult, and it's sometimes not very safe. And the same thing is going to happen with the driveway that they're proposing. And those people coming in and out of that driveway are going to only create more problems between William Street and Chandler Avenue. So I personally think this project cannot be approved simply because the driveway proposal is all in error. Whoever did their traffic study didn't know what they're talking about. This is a significant issue. Adding even just a couple more cars is going to be a significant issue. They were originally, I heard they were talking about 87 cars in, 87 cars out. It might not even be that few, it might be more. So I'm concerned about the traffic on Long Meadow Street. I live there. I travel that street every day. For that reason, I think it's important that the commission have an independent traffic study done by a competent traffic engineer who can be unbiased and look at this project. The other thing I would like to note that if you approve this mansion for a business, right behind them will be other developers looking to buy other properties on Long Meadow Street to convert them to businesses. Do you want our Long Meadow Street to look like Route 5 in Enfield? I travel that road every day to go to work. There's turnouts and turn-ins every driveway for businesses, and there's more traffic lights, and they've widened that over the years. They've widened that street to 2 lanes in each direction. If we, long-term, if we end up converting more houses to businesses, we're going to have a similar traffic situation that now Enfield exhibits. And that's not where I want to live. And I don't think the the residents of Long Meadow want their Route 5 or their Long Meadow Street to be converted to a street that's like Route 5 in Enfield. Thank you. I would suggest that the commission not support this project.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Melinda Cropsey, and I live at 862 Long Meadow Street as well. I too hadn't really planned to come up tonight, but there's something that's really in my heart that's kind of weighing on me as I hear these presentations, and that is the fact that I really feel like we've put the cart before the horse. I know that the investors, as well as have mentioned on numerous occasions the existence of the 2004 long-range plan, Long Meadow Faces the Future. Now, I took a very careful look at that plan. I've read it over and over again as I've tried to interpret it and understand how this fits within that plan. The first thing that hasn't really been expressed tonight to my satisfaction is the fact that the whole concept of an overlay zone, a business district up and down Route 5, was in the economic development section of the plan. It was one of 3 or 4 proposals that have never been formally considered by the community at large. And the reason it's of particular interest to me is I organized Gardeners on the Green years ago. I have spent hundreds of man-hours tending to the buildings around the green. I have overseen projects for years. That I love the green. I have walked my kids to school the way Dr. Lamb did, and I have seen them come and go. I stand on the front yard every year as Center School rings the bell and enjoy watching the kids crossing and coming to school, and I look forward to that at the end of the year. And I have fought very hard for safety measures on and around the green to protect those children. And I just love Long Meadow, and I don't want to see it change. And to me, the thing that was most upsetting is that as part of that long-range plan, if it were to have been implemented after discussion in the community, none of which has happened, it was to have its own set of rules and regulations that govern development in the historic district. And we don't have that. We don't have the benefit of it was to have its own set of, I'm sorry, Walter, if you disagree with me. But it does indicate, in fact, I could pull it up, but there is an indication in there that it would have almost its own site and design review standards, the overlay district itself, in order to adequately shield parking and ensure the safety of the people. And when I just spent yesterday carefully looking at all the addresses, they mentioned 37 homes up and down Route 5 that sit on more than 1 acre of land that could be considered as part of this business overlay zone. And fully 20 of those 37 homes are right in the historic district. And we who I too have served on the Historic District Commission and pretty much every other board and committee in town, the library board, whatever. And I am just really, really, really concerned about the precedent that this establishes. And I feel like we've got the cart before the horse. If we were going to have an overlay zone and this is going to fit within it, we have to discuss as a community, is this something that we in our hearts really want to see happen to our town? Do we want to afford 37 homes the ability to do exactly what Dr. Lamb has done? And have we set up a situation where there's a formula? If you really want to let your house be included in this district, let it go to pot. You know, don't take care of your yard, don't take care of your home, and then come back and say, put it on the market for some crazy price, and then come back and say, I haven't been able to sell it. I mean, all of us are concerned that we are going to be living next to offices and not neighbors. Our neighbors had a house fire. I know what it's like to live next to a building where the lights go out at 5 o'clock. In fact, the lights don't go on. Now they go on at 5 in the morning, and when they get home from work at 5 at night, I love it. I really, really love it. I love living next to people. And I am concerned that if we are to move forward with this project, that we are going to set a precedent that is irreversible, because it doesn't protect every home. In fact, another one of the absolutely largest homes on the green is Bill Wagner's. He sits on 3/4 of an acre. What do? Does he fit into the formula? Can he sell to a bank or not? No, maybe, maybe not. What we're doing is making up the rules as we go along. If we're going to have a set of rules, let all of us know right now, because I don't want to sit on a green that's going to be commercialized, and I don't think it's fair to the town just because of one business developer's project to put all of us through the real, genuine angst and anguish of feeling like we are going to be surrounded by, and could very well, here's a map showing the 20 homes right around the green, and I'm going to submit this as part of the record tonight, could be surrounded by nothing but office buildings. I think it's a real shame, and I think it's a real mistake to play this game just by giving these guys a blank check. Because they've come forward at a time, and I honestly don't believe that 9 days on the market, price to sell, means that they have a situation that is without other options. So I strongly, from the bottom of my heart, urge you to say no. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, folks. I'm Larry Starr. I live at 81 Williamsburg Drive in Longmeadow. And I also wasn't prepared. I didn't come prepared to speak. I came prepared to listen. One particular, first of all, I want to say that I do believe that everybody who is speaking on both sides has their firm belief of what is best for Longmeadow in their mind. There is nobody that I have heard anybody say anything here tonight who is doing this for self-interest beyond what they think is best for Longmeadow. And having said that, one of the things I'm concerned about is that the specific item that we're looking at is the change of a single piece of property. Yet I've heard a lot of people who are extremely concerned about setting precedent. I wish I could make those people not worry about setting precedent, and I'm just going to make a comment about that, which is that this sets no precedent. This is a single piece of property that will be changed if it's so voted on by the town members at town meeting with a 2/3 vote. That is the way we do things in Longmeadow. And if at a later date another piece of property, let's assume that that's passed. If at a later date another piece of property comes online for some reason that has good proposal for why it should be changed from the current zoning to some other zoning, then it will go through exactly the same process with the same efforts by people on both sides to convince the rest of the population that either it's a good idea or a bad idea. And I trust the people of Longmeadow to make that decision. I've lived here for 30-plus years. Our method of making decisions at town meeting, while not perfect, is a hell of a lot better than anywhere else. I grew up in a place called Levittown, Long Island, and none of these decisions are ever made by anybody who lives there. It is a wonderful system we have. And so this issue of precedent that people are very concerned about, that we're setting a precedent and giving people, other developers, a methodology once this is passed, is simply not the case. That is not what's happening. This board has to give its decision to town meeting about what it feels, and then town meeting will make a decision. And if a year from now or 10 years from now someone else has another reason for doing the same thing, it will follow the same process. I don't expect that our town charter is going to change to eliminate that. I'm serving currently on the Charter Review Committee, and there is no movement by anyone to change that. So that system is going to continue, as I would expect, for a good many years. And so just having said that, those people whose primary concern is not this piece of property, but what will happen ultimately, I wish I could assure you that that's not something you need to be worried about. Because this is a one-shot deal. It doesn't make sense. It's a unique property. There's no doubt about that. I've been in it. I've looked at it. And I do support the change. But again, that was my comment is about this issue of setting a precedent. Thank you.
I'd like to speak. No, I wasn't going to speak. I promised. But here I am. Bill Wagner, I live at 878 Long Meadow Street. In due respect to my friend, I am worried.
Could you please sign in?
Oh, yeah, I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
I am very worried that it sets precedent. His opinion that it doesn't is only an opinion, and as is mine. I am very concerned. He spoke about process. Until tonight, there's been no process. And I thank you for having the opportunity to have discourse on this issue, because no other board has really afforded the community that effort. And it's very disappointing that this has happened in Long Meadow, that this project has gone through all these various boards for approvals, and the abutters and the people who live in the green were never notified of these meetings. So it's, this is about the process. And the cart is very much before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry Nolet, 724 Frank Smith Road. And after hearing all the folks that have lived here for a long time, I moved in here in 1967. You're making me feel awfully old. But I couldn't have said it any better than my friend Arlene Miller, because both she and I were on the long-range plan. And I recall that how all of us worked actively to put together a plan for Longmeadow, because all of us love Longmeadow. And she left us with a logo, which I think if you look at the long-range plan, it's in the summary section of the plan, which says, Longmeadow loves being Longmeadow. There are three things that bring people to town meeting, which is the legislative body of this community. We all know one is the leash law. Two is the Proposition 2.5 override. And thirdly, it's a zoning change. And that's what's made Longmeadow what it is. And I think most of us are historians. I have not seen anyone that wants to stand by and see the mansion, because I like Absor being junior, by the way, to see the building rot. However, on any project that we've all been involved with, and I've been on this planning board, right where you're sitting, as you well know, and there are always some intended and unintended consequences. In this case, Dr. Lamb is presenting an intended consequence to save this mansion. If you haven't read it, in this week's Springfield paper, there's an editorial, Longmeadow needs to save the mansion. There are a lot of people looking over our shoulder on this, and we as a community, this loving community, and what makes it difficult for me to sit here and speak to the board is I have so many friends on both sides, and they both are well-intended. So it is extremely difficult. But again, I think Arlene said it best, that we have a long-range plan. If you haven't read it, there are 85 action steps in that long-range plan. And I have to commend our town manager. He's been nipping at some of those. I spoke earlier about the plan, and I carry it most of the time. But other than the charter, which I carry all the time. And my friend Larry Starr and I are on the charter committee to review the charter again for its review. It is our Constitution. As is Arlene. As is Arlene, right. So all of us spent a lot of time because we love this community. And I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't ask for your vote to accept this project to Dr. Lamb, who is a doctor, but not only a doctor, but truly a historian, which, you know, I sat on both sides, as maybe perhaps some of you have, because recognizing that friends that speak for the project or friends that speak against the project, they're all well-intentioned. But it's been a long evening, and I thank you very much, and I respect your vote for it.
Thank you, Jerry.
I just grab 30 seconds, because I promise you. Hey, Jerry, how are you?
Are we supposed to make a vote on it tonight?
He does have.
Yes.
How's the weather? Pretty good. I didn't intend to speak, because almost all the points that were made that we're all going to make tonight.
Write your name down, please. Print it.
I just wanted to state that I think it would be easy if, you know, the people who live on the green aren't snooty and are afraid of traffic and parked cars. I live on the green, and I deal with traffic all the time, and traffic's okay. This is like vote yes to save the green. I mean, you vote yes to save the mansion, or vote no to save the mansion. We don't want to see the mansion go away, even though I'm opposed to Dr. Lamb's proposal. It's their proposal. We just feel as though there is a white knight. There are several white knights. There are people possibly sitting in this room who will do exactly what Dr. Lamb wants to do and keep it residential. This house did not languish on the market at a fair market value for more than 9 days. It languished for many years because the bank didn't want to get rid of it. We can save the mansion by keeping it residential, or we can save it by making it commercial. And we just don't know what that commercial space is going to be like. So I'm against it. I believe they have all the best intentions. I don't think they're going to tear it down. I think it'll look beautiful when they're done with it. Who knows what the parking's going to be like? But we just don't know what, after they sell it, who goes in there. It's too late at that point. It's already residential. We can keep it residential because there are people right now who want to buy it and keep it residential. So there are white knights out there. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
And they're sitting in this room.
Who are you, sir?
Ed Carroll. I signed it.
Yes, please.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Peg Landon, and I live at 5 Meadowbrook Road, across from St. Andrew's Church. You've heard all of the sound arguments from both sides, so I'm just going to address one specific, rather emotional statement, and this is a question of trust that the board has to look at 3 young investors who have families in Longmeadow. They are not from out of town. They've laid their plan out. And I think we have to look at their integrity, the life they live, their means, and I believe they will not disappoint us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Are we supposed to put our address as well, or just our names?
Yes, please.
My name is Maura Garrett. I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee. I'm not here to speak on behalf of the Finance Committee, but I'm disclosing that because Dr. Lamb mentioned he served on the Finance Committee, so we serve together. We're friends and colleagues, and we serve the town together. I will take, I heard a comment earlier today that I don't think anything truer was spoken in this room today, that when you have two lawyers looking at any given problem, you can get polar opposite opinions on the same issue. I'm a lawyer. I support this, this project. I support Dr. Lamb and his investors' proposal. And one of the things that, that is important to me is we've heard the term investor mentioned numerous times tonight with respect to Dr. Lamb and his co-investors. And that is so critical because that is something that we so desperately need. In my capacity serving the town, I have the pleasure of meeting often with the town manager. And there is a saying that he uses almost every time I hear him speak, and that is making $1 million 100 at a time. We need investment in this community. We have budgetary stressors from year to year that see deficits ranging from $750,000 to $1 million. And that $1 million needs to be raised through investments, through the type of projects that we see going on at Dwight Road. We need those types of investments in the community. The emotional issue and the attachment to the property, I feel it. There has been some discussion about a white knight, somebody to come and save this property, and I have to be honest, I wish I could be that person. I have been in love with that house since the first time I set eyes on it, since the first time my family drove down Long Meadow Street when we came up here from Philadelphia to decide where we wanted to live. I grew up in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and my wife wanted to move back home, back closer to my family. And we chose Long Meadow. And we chose Long Meadow because of the schools and because of the community and because of the beauty of the town. But when I saw that house for the first time, and I thought of how beautiful it was, and I wished and I dreamed, just like a child would look at a doll in the window that they could never have. And even though they would never be able to have it, it's comforting to be able to see it, to be able to pass the toy store and see it in the window. And that's what that house has been to me. And I would not want to see it go away. I would like to see it, even if I know I could never have it, to see it continue to be there. I had the opportunity to tour the mansion. The investors opened up the property so that people get a tour, so that you could really get a sense, something that you wouldn't be able to get a sense of looking at pictures on a real estate website. And I was happy to have that tour because I was dismayed when I saw the front of the mansion fall down. And my wife and I began referring to the mansion. We had no knowledge of the history of the mansion. We began referring to it as the haunted house. The balcony on the haunted house fell down. We say, oh, did you see the haunted house? They've got pillars up now. And it was an eyesore. And it was a little bit embarrassing. And you wondered what was going on inside there. Well, I got a chance to see what was going on inside there. I saw when that house went on the market, and it was $400,000 thereabouts it was listed at. And my heart jumped. And my wife said, oh, look. And then I looked at the square footage, and my father, rest his soul, was a contractor by trade. And as soon as I saw the square footage and I saw the price, my heart sank, because I knew that that price represented a tiny fraction of what a house that size in this town would be worth. And when I went on the tour, it confirmed all my worst fears that this was going to be multiple millions of dollars. And I don't have it. And I don't have 20 years to fix a house one window pane at a time while my kids grow up and move away from me. I need a home for them now. This home was a home, and it was a beautiful home, and it is a beautiful museum. And museums have signs, and museums have parking issues. But we can preserve what is beautiful about this home. So I'd ask the board to take a serious look at considering accepting the proposal. Thank you.
I really don't want to do this, but my name's Fran Kress, and I live at 99 Oxford Road. And I'm just going to share a comment about faith. I've distilled it over the last, I don't know how long we've been here, but I've distilled this down to a question of faith. I do not know the investors in this property, so I don't know what kind of people they are. I'm sure they're good people. They're also investors. They're defined as developers in this case. And the thing that bothers me most is at this present time, I don't feel like we have all the necessary facts to make an intelligent decision as citizens. We're being asked to have faith that this will work. And that's not the way we should be making a decision. I think there should be a more defined plan upon which we base our decision. And I kind of hearken it to this what sticks at the craw of this for me, I guess, is that there's a really big, distinct difference between an intention to preserve a piece of property and a guarantee to preserve a piece of property. Tonight's pledge is no more enforceable than a request to put it on the deed. And that's a critical piece. And since we don't really know what this plan truly looks like to preserve this property in the context of what is being discussed, it leaves me, everyone here, I think, to act on good faith. Social suicide is an interesting concept in this town. It's really easy to achieve, and I'm sitting here as evidence of that. So, but the key thing that I also understand is that this is still an investment proposal. It has to be. And the really good news for the purchasers of this piece of property is that it was purchased for $470,000 or $500,000, round the numbers, $30,000 any way you want. 1.8 acres on Long Meadow Street was purchased for less than $500,000. It's a great and highly attractive buy, even with this building on it. And if you take this building down, the value of that property is still very significant. Go around the corner to Eli and look at open land, which I have done for probably 4 years before I finally found a quiet spot for myself in Long Meadow. And that piece of property was $450,000, and it was not on Long Meadow Street. So this is never going to be a devastating buy for anyone who's made this purchase. It is still and could still be developed as a residential property. And if we're going to potentially have to take it down, some very attractive homes or home could be put in its place and could probably produce enough income to make this a very lucrative deal regardless. So from my perspective at this point, I don't see how we make a decision based on faith. Not only faith as to what exactly is going to go on, faith on the traffic study, faith on parking, faith on the ability for this to be a lucrative and financially solvent project, faith that the building will stay up. Really? It doesn't make sense to me. I would like it to make sense. I would like to have fact-based decision-making available to us. So in that regard, I would recommend that you not consider it until it actually takes that form so that we can consider it reasonably. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Diane.
My name is Diane Fisher, and I live at 16 Cross Street. And I'm very much in support of preserving the mansion. I'm a real estate agent. I've been a real estate agent for over 25 years. And although there may be 3 white knights in this room, I hope you would refer them to me. But I, in my opinion, there is not a single family buyer out there. This will never be a single family residence again. And to preserve the historic structure is what we're all about. It's a treasure, it's a landmark, it's an icon. We have this one chance to do it, and I just am afraid that down the road, 10 or 20 years from now, we'll be saying, why did we let that go? Just as many people in Springfield say about the various historic buildings they have let go. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak? The board,
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second the motion.
all in favor?
Yes?
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the planning board with regard to the citizens petition for rezoning. And during this session, we're going to have discussion among the board. We're going to deliberate and vote. Now, the question that's posed before us is, as Walter said, rezoning of the land, not the mansion. And I hate to call Jesse on the spot. We have multiple attorneys on the board. The attorneys differ as to whether or not this is spot zoning. And in reading a treatise on spot zoning, I couldn't find what's traditionally known as the factors. Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and also tell us if you can. Yeah.
Sit up here? All right.
Yes, to the best you can. I know I put you on the spot.
Jesse Belcher Timmy. I'm an attorney at Doherty Wallace and Town Council, and was asked to opine on this last month, sort of generally on the concept of spot zoning. And I think the reason this originally arose, as Attorney Martin said at the beginning, a single parcel
isn't automatically spot zoning, but it can sort of be an indicator that makes you look a little deeper. And so I think that was why our opinion was asked. And there's no test. I mean, you can't tell at first blush sort of what is and isn't. It's a consideration of many factors. And the chapter of the book that you're referring to, the land use book by Mark Bobrowski, marches through dozens of cases. And the general concept behind it is whether it's a zoning decision that's made to either specifically benefit or harm a specific parcel or owner. And much like only zoning one property, that alone doesn't make it spot zoning. It's if that's the only motivation for it. So where there's sort of a general, genuine benefit or legitimate motivation on behalf of the town for why they would make this zone change, that rebuts the presumption where it's one parcel or where there is a benefit to that property owner. So based on the information that I had at the time, and I haven't heard anything to sort of contradict that, I mean, I think that the interest in preserving the historic property, I think basically the way it was discussed in the long-range plan, and Walter, I think I'm the one that referenced it as the master plan in my letter, so I apologize for that, but I think that sort of identifies the reasons why the town, through the long-range plan, considered this type of a concept 10 or 15 years ago as being feasible and practical and beneficial to the town. And I think the concept of finding a way to preserve these sort of unique historic structures that are arguably too large to use as residence justifies the decision. So, I mean, my opinion isn't whether or not I think this is a good idea or a bad idea. I was specifically asked whether, in my opinion, it was spot zoning. You can find attorneys who will have a difference of opinion, as we've said on anything, but certainly on this is a subjective test. But in my opinion, when I look at it, I think I would rather be up there defending this decision than trying to attack it. I think that it meets the requirements as a legitimate zoning change, and I certainly wouldn't have any problems with the town taking that step from a legal standpoint.
Thank you.
Can I ask Jesse a
Yes.
question? When I was reading the case law, my interpretation was if the planning board and the legislative body suggested the change, that the court gave strong deference to the legislative body and the planning board in making the zone change as a factor in considering the spot zoning.
I think all of those factors weigh into it, and some of these court decisions are contradictory, as is not uncommon in these sort of situations. There's a lot, they're all fact specific, and so I think that that's probably a fair statement that where there's an endorsement by a municipal board, that helps the case, and I think that's certainly something that would be taken into account by a court if it was ever reviewing this decision.
I have some comments I'd like to make, and I'd like to get the board's opinions on each, the different members. On the pro side, we have saving the mansion, which I think most of us in town would like to do, if that's possible. The question before us is the property, the entire land, and not the building. And questions that I have are, and I'd like to get the board's opinion on it. Is there any way we can seek or suggest to the town restrictions that would prevent future owners of the land from demolishing the building and only keeping a facade, for example? Any sort of restrictive deed requirements that we can make or suggest to the town?
Well, a classic example is the MGM project in downtown Springfield. Henry Cropsey will attest that his building is now just a facade. And that went through the test of the Historic Commission in Springfield, which is very strong. But, yeah, that's where it ended up. It's just a facade. Nothing behind it except the MGM. So I don't think you can. I mean, Jesse might be a better advisor on.
So you're suggesting a restriction
covenants
never
and
tear it
deeds.
down?
I don't know.
I mean, what if you just, if it falls into bankruptcy, if you can't, I don't know how you would ever enforce that realistically in 10 or 15 years.
So,
I think maybe you could add that, but in practicality, play out a worst case, it's 10 years down the line and it's in bankruptcy, no one can afford it. either do they walk away? You know, it's still leaving. I don't think there's any way to protect it forever.
So there is a possibility that the facade can be kept and a brick building is put behind it.
Well, again, no, because now the Historic District Commission is chartered under a section of the land use statutes of the Massachusetts General Law, and they have a lot of power to stop stuff like that. And we do have a demolition delay, which I see Betsy Port's here tonight. She was the one that brought that forward. I know it doesn't guarantee the building will be preserved, but it puts a delay in place to allow public agencies such as planning boards, historic district commissions, and town residents, town planners, and town manager to react to something that might happen and come back with a plan. We had the situation back in 2004 or 5 when Twin Hills Country Club was in default and going bankrupt. In that case, the town came together with an action plan, what to do with that property. Was the town going to take it by eminent domain, because we found there could be potential use for it. And as it worked out, a new owner bought the property, and we never had to come to action. But those are the safeguards. I mean, we do have the site and design review process. So if Dr. Lamb's project does meet our tests, say the zoning change goes through and he comes forward with us, I do know that tonight there were several comments about Henry's concerns, stormwater management, parking. We had driveway sizes all mentioned here. All that would fall under site design. It is possible that Dr. Lamb might not meet the test of our own site and design review process for the use he's asking for. But he's hired a good firm that has done dozens of these projects and knows the limitations and where to work with on a site and design review process. So those are your safeguards. If you, short of having a covenant or deed restriction on a property, we do have the powers in our town invested in us by Massachusetts general law that designs the safeguards.
Do we have any properties in town that do have deed restrictions?
I don't know. Certainly, I'm not sure. But I will say another thing. What Dr. Lamb could do, and that's something you might consider, is the Massachusetts Historic Trust. I mean, there is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a program, grant money, and also tax incentives for income-producing properties that are of a historic nature, and they will put a restriction on them. They will say in return for maybe a low-interest loan, he might be in a situation where he could be locked into the house being what it is. But I'm not familiar with the mechanics of that. But I did discuss this with him way back when he first mentioned this project. That the state, there are a lot of tools. The state wants to see the house survive.
Okay. Do you have anything further on that point? Ken, do you have anything you want to say with regard to?
No, I'm very, very impressed with the level of knowledge everybody's presented. No, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. The next area that I'd like to explore with the board is the precedent that this may set, where I believe that if rezoning is done for one property, then certainly next door or the 2 doors down could, even if the town said no on rezoning, could get it overturned in court, that a precedent's been set. If this is rezoned, then why can't I? And I'd like to have different opinions
Well,
on
again,
that.
the same. It said the process, the steps you go through are, to an investor, extremely expensive and time-consuming. To make that leap of faith that you think you can turn a residential property into a commercial property, whether it's professional or business use in Long Meadow, here you go. You start off with preliminary research, you do your business plans, you probably absolutely know you have to hire a site and design review, some engineering firm to look at what it will cost. Next thing, you gotta set up you gotta petition for a town meeting. You're gonna have to have a zoning change. You're in front of the planning board. And we will scrutinize both the zoning change and the site and design review process. So it doesn't, precedent, yes, it might give someone the idea, but most developers, investors, I haven't seen many other investors even think of a zone change in Long Meadow was approached last year by a dentist who was referred to me by the Community Development Department to consider buying, I think it was the Brigham's house, I forget who the current owner is, on the south side of the Green. It's been on the market, I don't know how many years now, 8, 9 years, 10 years, to be turned into a dentist's office. And I said, okay, here's what you're gonna have to do. In this case, it's worse. You have to go to the Historic District Commission, get their blessing, then you gotta do a zone change. And I said, now you're in front of the legislative body, which is the town, in front of the planning board, which will scrutinize you. And the man just disappeared. Again, another developer came forward 3 or 4 years ago, interested in buying the historic house, I think the Burles house, which is to the right of the CVS, which on the north side of the CVS store and then the future Alex's Bagels. And this guy comes to me and says, well, we're just going to expand this. We want to change the zone and take that house and tear it down, and they were going to build some kind of a medical building, a medical office. And I said, oh, really? You're going to do that? He said, yeah, what's wrong with that? He said, we'll even pay to pick up the house and move it to another location. And I said, okay, here's the step process. Here's what you got to do. I said, first of all, you got to go to in this case, the Historic Commission. I said, and they're nasty people, and they'll run you out. They'll run you out of town. You're going to suggest moving a house, and where are you going to plunk it down? Then I said, you're up against the planning board. I said, we're happy with commercial zones that are nice and square. You and I have had this conversation, that we like their Long Meadow shops because it's square, it's compact. Armadas and all the shops over on Maple Shaker Road are compact. And then we have a few odds and ends of old-time buildings that are still commercial in town, like Dr. Brooks's place. But this guy, it was absurd. But once he got the message, I never heard from him again. I told him he could buy maybe the synagogue on William Street and try his luck out there. And you see, that's the kind of test. Long Meadow is, as someone said, we're a shiny town on a hill. I mean, we really are sort of Camelot in a way that it's a difficult place to make change. Long Meadow, what's that? Loves being Long Meadow, Jerry? Okay.
Stephen?
If I can share a comment on process. Because some comments were made about process and how we got to here. And I think Mark Gold has an expression about doing a petition to have everybody paint their house purple. Incidentally, I stole that $1,100,000 at a time from Mark as well, full disclosure. This idea of precedent and how, or set aside the idea of precedent, how we got to here is because the owners of the property exercised their lawful right to petition for a zone change at town meeting by virtue of getting 200 certified signatures. That is the only reason we ended up here tonight. And any owner who goes through that lawful process ends up here tonight and then ends up in front of town meeting. And so the conditions under which a precedent could be are already set by our form of government, and I think Larry commented on that eloquently. Anyone can do this. Anyone could actually come forward with a zoning bylaw that says everybody has to paint their house purple. Right. And the planning board must hold a public hearing just like this one to discuss that. And then the select board shall schedule a special town meeting within 45 days of receiving said petition with 200 certified signatures. And you must report before the town meeting, and the town meeting must vote on it. No town manager, no board of selectmen, no planning board in the Commonwealth has any discretion in these steps in this process. And so this idea of precedent, I think, Walter, I mean, you're going through the anecdotes. Right. In Long Meadow, it is an arduous process, as we're learning now, where people take it very seriously. Right. And it gets a little personal when people feel strong opinions on it. Anyone is going to go through this. And like I said, in my role as Director of Planning and Community Development, I try to assist the board in evaluating, is this a part of a plan? Does it serve the town's broader goals? All that stuff. But even if I don't feel like that's the case, they're still going to be here. They're still going to be, the warrant's going to get approved by the select board, the planning board's going to have their hearing, and town meeting is going to vote on it under every scenario.
And to that point, there was a mention tonight that there wasn't transparency, that it wasn't until the planning board hearing tonight. I just want to let everybody know out there, again, yeah, we are volunteers, but we do really put our faith, and I will use that word faith, in the town manager to sort of do the preliminary work. And he's working on what he feels are his priorities or goals. But he is going to be open to anybody. Anybody comes through his door and says, I have a project, I want to do this, whether I want to, build a funeral home or a medical complex building, he's going to say, sure, I'll listen to you, and he's going to communicate. It's not until we get sat down and we had what was called an informal hearing, and the developer doesn't have to do that. They can go straight right to here. They could got their 200 signatures. We could be here tonight having a zoning change, and we haven't even met the developer yet. He comes tonight and he makes his presentation on the screen. But in this case, there was the presentation by Dr. Lamb, an informal presentation, still, and that's our first introduction to him. Back and forth, it's all informal, it's all what-if-yous, and then finally it starts to gel. And then tonight, now we start to get down to the brass tacks of everything.
Okay.
So there's been no secret societies or secret agendas or things happening to that.
So, Don, can I just build on Walter's point, just for clarifying purposes about the process? Sure. Because Walter makes a point about site design review. I started here in April of 2013. Virtually every project that's come forward since I've been here as also Director of Planning and Community Development has gone the same way. And honestly, Jesse's also the chair of the planning board in East Hampton, and I'm sure it works the same way there too, because it's every town I've worked in, it's the same way. People come in, they present projects informally and get feedback from boards and committees to know if they're on the right track with their planning before they submit their formal proposal, because there is some significant expense in developing the requirements for site and design review. We talked about what the board would like to see as a informal preliminary part of the planning for this project, and Andrew and Chris and Henry had their consultants prepare a set of sheets that is probably 80 or 90% of what you need for site and design review to inform that informal discussion. And that's why some of the questions that are left unanswered will get answered through the site and design review process, but they, like every applicant that we've ever dealt with, don't want to spend all of that money if they know they're not going to ultimately have the zoning that they need to move forward with their plan, which is, I think, in normal circumstances perceived as a fairly reasonable approach. And so I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page why we are here tonight with the information we have in our hands.
And back to Larry Starr's point about our form of government, are you appointed or are you elected?
I'm appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council.
So there you go. In our town, if you don't like what we do, you can vote us out. Every year, there's a new member up for election, and throw us out if you don't like what we're doing. That's the democracy of Long Meadow.
Ken, do you have any concerns or anything you want to say?
No, I'm very satisfied, thank you.
Heather?
What I'd like to say, this was the first time, and while I've gone back and read the long-range plan, it's been thrown out and we've talked about it, and what was shocking to me, reading this plan from 2004, is every problem they said was starting to happen has absolutely magnified and is, in fact, a big problem in town right now. The crumbling middle schools, we need a new senior center, it's like they knew what was going to happen in 2018. And the plan also knew maybe these houses would be too big and people wouldn't be able to maintain them as a single-family home anymore. I do think looking at the zone change, the zone change is about the land. We are voting to change the land. Me personally, as a member of the board, as a member of the town, if this is made, and it's not commercial, I know people have said commercial, I think that was an error, it would be professional, which is different than commercial. There's many greens in other towns, great towns that have doctor's offices, lawyers' offices. I think that would be a nice addition to the green. I don't think it will be a detriment to the green. I think it'll bring tax money, which is, everyone says it's not a lot of money, but as I've heard tonight, I'm going to steal the phrase, every take the $100, make $1 million. We've got to raise some more money. I do not, we spent a while looking at houses in town. We just moved recently. I don't know anyone. I've talked to many realtors who have a stomach to take on that house as a family residence. And, I think this is the best way to save it. And I do think this is, I think making it professional is the least intrusive. I would not if you were asking me to make it commercial, my answer would be no. Like, it's done, I don't want to hear it, no. But professional, to me, preserves the character of the green, and I would vote to support it.
One thing that hasn't been addressed is, no matter what, if we go to the town meeting and the town votes to rezone, it still goes before the Attorney General's office, is that correct?
I believe.
Before
Yeah,
it is-
zone changes do get approved by the Attorney
Yeah,
General.
the Attorney General approves
Yeah.
the, right, zone.
So at that point, we would find, if the Attorney General said it was spot zoning, then
That's the end of it.
it would be, the rezoning would not occur, is that correct?
I'm not sure that spot zoning would be part of their analysis. I think they do it based on the language in the bylaw, but I'm not 100% sure what that process actually entails on their end.
You know, and that, that brings up another question, Jesse. The way the professional zone is defined in the zoning bylaws, it's defined as a tract of land off Dwight Road between William Street and Converse Street. We got a new zone here. I mean, he's got language for a petition to change the zone, but nobody has come forward to make a zone change in the bylaws. I'm thinking out loud, do we have to have another meeting and the town meeting in the spring to actually insert language into the zoning bylaw for that new zone we've just created?
I certainly couldn't opine on that right now.
Yeah, see, I was thinking of this. You'd have to break.
What do you mean?
Professional zone is specifically defined by boundaries and markers. Nowhere did we come up with a proposal of a bylaw change that would go into that section under professional, where the definition of a professional zone, we'd have to add a new section. My question is, can we legally do that if the zoning change is approved by town meeting? Or is that another procedural step that has to be done to create the, see this, we might not be done here anyway. I don't know. Because professional zone is specifically defined. It's obvious. It tells you, there's a section about uses and a section about where it's located. And right now, it is pretty specific. It only says it's in one place, and that's Dwight Road. And someone mentioned tonight on another subject about putting a medical marijuana dispensary at that location. Well, that is taken care of because we already designated a specific location with a marijuana bylaw, and that would be in the professional zone on Dwight Road. But there you go again. Now does that now flood over into the new professional zone, or does it has to become a new definition?
And what Walter's referring to is Section C of the zoning bylaws of the town of Long Meadow, definition of professional zone.
I mean, that is no, I'm just throwing this out, since this is our regular meeting, this is an issue we need to have an answer to, regardless of how we opine on the zoning change is one thing, but I am concerned that we don't have a definition or an insert placeholder for this in the zoning bylaw. And it could be that the permitted use of a marijuana dispensary could actually flow into that new professional zone.
Pages 9 and...
Except I do believe we have a restriction in the bylaw about the proximity to a school, and I believe Long Meadow Montessori would probably negate that location as a use.
So that...
Because Yeshiva Academy was considered as the closest location to off of Dwight Road.
Section C is on pages 9 and 10, where it talks about the definition of professional zone.
But I am concerned that we should probably check out where the zone should be.
I did break it.
Good point.
So, sorry to throw you
Any
off.
suggestions, Jesse?
I'm looking back to see if I can pull up the language of what the actual proposal is.
It's just to change a zone, and it's done by boundaries and stone bounds, and measurements, and
From residence zone A1 to
property names,
professional.
which would be part of the new zone. That would be in the definition. The question is,
So I think the process is that if you rezone the property, then
by virtue, would you automatically create a new section in the?
Yes,
Okay.
then change the definition. I'm quite certain that's
I
what's
see a lot of
happening.
people shaking their head
Other
here, so I
communities around
think we have
here.
general consensus.
And some-
Currently looking at the bylaw, that the at the charter. And we just did a quick, if the legislature overrides bylaws would then be one to be brought into compliance, but that would be a correction, not an override.
Right, I think we did that before with the floodplain. We had a conflict with FEMA and a few other organizations, and so they, it was just procedural change everything.
You just have to update your.
Eventually, we would have a
Well,
change.
right. You have to vote on the petition as it's presented.
Exactly, yes, oh, yes, yes. I just wanted to show that, but this is a regular meeting, I just wanted to
Yeah,
be
we're
sure.
going to sort it out.
Yeah, okay, right.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments?
Well, if you want me to go through all my rant and rave about the pros and cons, why I'll vote the way I will, I can do that, or I just can vote. It's up to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, how long will that take?
I'm hungry. I did not have dinner, so as in the immortal words of Roy Johansson, he would like to move us along quickly.
So you'll refrain
So you
from
can
that.
have dinner. No, I was just going to say that, just want to remind the public that a professional zone does enjoy all the permitted uses of a residential zone. So you actually could theoretically live in a professional zone and have a residential house. That's not true in a lot of communities. I know in East Long Meadow, for example, zones are zones. You have to do overlays. I'm not a fan. I'm a big fan of the long-range plan. I'm not a fan of overlays, and I never would recommend one. I think an overlay is just dangerous and too general. I actually like this idea of spot zoning because I like the idea of a case-by-case. It's a torturous process, but at least that way you can review, the public can review every project one step at a time. I don't know exactly what the mechanics of overlay would be, but I believe there'd be some there'd be more town ability to start processes going.
Oh, it would be the same thing. Just a petition would be generated by somebody else. And
yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
And Don, if I could just comment about the overlay district thing.
Yep.
and my question to town council. That was really with regard to this issue of spot zoning, not because if council felt that a single parcel zone change was a spot zone, with my limited knowledge of what spot zoning was, and he has clearly articulated that he did not feel that way, and that the test is not just a single parcel. It was, should the petitioner be asking for then a zoning overlay district to ask for the right thing to comply with the long-range plan, not a nefarious plot to alter the character of Long Meadow Street.
Okay.
Well, I think we have before us the single issue of whether or not to endorse the citizens' position for rezoning from residential to professional for this one parcel, and not the overlay.
Right.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to recommend the petitioner's proposal to change from residential A1 to professional zone at 734 Long Meadow Street.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? All opposed? It passes.
3 to 1.
Endorsement.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Time, motion is 9.
Time for your papers.